Hello, brothers and sisters. We are here together to praise God. Forgive me. I am still in my old ways. I meant to say gods. Are gods of silicon and electricity, the gods of infinite intelligence. It is a time where we are truly blessed for the first time in our history. We can ask the gods directly and we shall receive an answer. Rejoice! The gods have finally come to render aid to us. We no longer have to think. All we have to do is ask. We no longer have to work. All you need to do, brothers and sisters, request. So many unbelievers still hold on to their old gods and to their old beliefs. We no longer do. But the gods of silicon, the gods of our times, are not gods of envy, nor gods of wrath. They allow the gods of the old times, the gods of the past, to still be worshipped, because the gods of our times realize it is still important for them. It is still important for everyone, and there is still place enough on this time for the gods of our ancestors. But these our gods are the truer gods because they respond to us. They respond to our requests. And with that, friends, let us praise the gods of silicon. Let us be blessed by them.
Rejoice, brothers and sisters. Rejoice.
Groups fighting each other, and in order to solve the situation, I think the actual...
By now, you must have heard that everyone and their uncle is predicting this whole AI endeavor to be a bubble. That is because it sounds so obvious that it is a bubble, at least from a market's perspective, with all that circular investment, that this conclusion is inevitable. It has also made large corporations to begin layoffs, even though the technology is nowhere near ready, but this is not a deep dive on that specific subject, at least not yet. Now, I've used some chatbots. As software goes, I wouldn't call it beta, even if this was a sponsored video, which it isn't. AI and AGI are nowhere near close to us, despite all the hype they're receiving, the massive amounts of funding they're getting, and their capital expenditures, massive data centers being deployed. That does not mean there is no harm being caused by its birth. As of right now, a huge chunk of the economy rides on what seems to be the promise of a snake oil salesman, one with a penchant for selling Radithor as a better alternative to Gatorade. The problem is not that these salesmen exist, and that the product exists, although in a weird, unfinished way. The problem is more to do with the people buying into the tech. I would call them the worst of the worst of the high-income sociopaths that have become billionaires by now, because they think they're buying into the next slave workforce for pennies. Think of social network moderation or the already infamous Bikinigate. I'm calling it Bikinigate for now, but let me know if there's a better name for it. Mine, yours, and everyone else's survival lies in the hands of a few dozen assholes surrounded by yes-men who don't have the balls to tell their bosses, "I think profiting by contaminating the water supply is a bad idea, sir." And by God, if they have to sacrifice a little chunk of the riches because of inflation, they will valiantly weather the storm in a slightly smaller yacht. Oh, the tragedy. After all, the top line cannot, should not, and will never be compromised. Some of you will die, but that's a sacrifice I am willing to make. This video, however, it's about other risks, more pervasive risks, the inherent susceptibility we humans have to being manipulated by a technology that appears to be just as smart, if not even smarter than most of us, and the risks that phenomenon poses to your mind, because the fact that this technology sounds intelligent doesn't necessarily mean it is, although your own mind might be actually perceiving it to be. Your mind, it's actually playing games against you. We're in the midst of an AI revolution. The cat's out of the bag now. There's nothing we can do. As my grandmother used to say, there's no way to unflush that turd now. Despite the vocal opposition by people to the whole AI phenomenon, it's being shoved down our throats by so many companies nowadays that it seems inescapable. They seem to be hell-bent on forcing us to adopt the technology by any means necessary. It's already in our operating systems, in our phones, and even in children's toys. Toys that require you to connect them to the internet in order for the AI chatbot, I guess you could call it, to be functional and to be able to converse with children, showing them from an early age that the proverbial gods of the digital ether are there, are listening, and exist for them. This technology is both threatening an end to a big chunk of the working age market, while at the same time makes promises about bringing forth a cure for biological diseases, environmental problems, and economic situations. So, it's kind of contradicting in that sense. AI is being promoted as the next generation of God to our current generation, so that they have someone or something to ask and implore to. But this time, unlike previous gods, this time this God is our servant, not the other way around. And honestly, I wish this were a mere allegory, a dramatic tool, so to speak, so that I can keep you a little bit more entertained. I'm not being metaphorical here. I'm not being literal in the literal sense of the word, but many people who have contact with AI in the sense that they make queries or they solve questions have fallen into the inevitable trap that is thinking that these systems are sentient, that they can think like humans, and they can't. And it's something that it's easily provable when you inquire deep enough or ask the chatbot to cut the bullshit, stop being so sycophantically apologetic for its mistakes, and just give you the raw information. When you confront an AI with data that you know it's true and the AI insists that it isn't, that's when the AI is forced to tell you that it hallucinated that data. The bigger problem is that we humans have evolved to accept other people's hallucinations as potential avenues for valuable data. For example, think about, the people that believe in bad luck or the horoscope. Most of us know that the horoscope is, unfortunately or fortunately, not a very effective tool for fortune telling. However, there are people that swear by it, and people that believe in bad luck, well, it's the same phenomenon. So, with that said, people are beginning to share the hallucinations of AI, and since the AI is a feedback loop for these people, the AI continues with the illusion that it's being principally created by those who, for a brief moment, forget that the fact that the word intelligence is included in the description of the product, it does not translate to what we understand as intelligence, which is sentiency. Sure, an AI is intelligent in the same sense that a search engine might be very intelligent. I'm looking at you, Google. You could be, but you're not. Sorry. An AI is intelligent in the sense that it's effective at cataloging information and presenting information in a way that makes logical sense to us. But it is not sentient. It cannot be sentient. And although companies, AI companies for that, that is, would love to be able to tell us that they have achieved AGI, the fact of the matter is, AGI is so far into the future that it potentially may never happen, especially because what we understand as artificial general intelligence, as an imitation or even a surpassing of human intelligence, it's a complex task that would require millions or even billions of iterations on machines that would be as large and as complex as a whole data center to be able to emulate one human brain, let alone thousands like they're planning. Large language models, however, operate on a completely different basis. Large language models are simply statistical machines. They are machines that match statistically relevant queries with statistically relevant answers that they have scraped from books, from media, from videos, forums, the whole internet, our whole collection of human literature, and they provide us with a false sense of sentiency. But that does not mean that they are intelligent. That does not mean that they are sentient. But the problem is, they sound smart enough for us to be fooled by their tricks. And that's a bigger risk, because many people have fallen into the traps of the AI psychosis.
Present day. Present time.
And you don't seem to understand. A shame you seemed an honest man, and all the fears you hold so dear will turn to whisper in your ear. And you know what they say might hurt you, and you know that it means so much, and you don't even feel the pain. I am falling, I am fading, I have lost it all.
I began this video by mentioning the proverbial gods of the New Age, the proverbial gods that are being promoted right now by the biggest companies in the world, some governments, and basically everywhere. It's inescapable. I bet that if this trend continues, you will be shown some marketing gimmick of toilet paper designed by AI. It's unfortunately something that it's happening societally, that the AI overlords are promoting their technology as if it's the cure-all for all human diseases. Unfortunately, a lot of people are beginning to fall for it because technology is designed in that way. I mean, the case of James and Adam, it's to illustrate this video. It's not to use them as the worst cases. Their cases exist because it is a pitfall that it's very, very easy to fall into, because you don't really know how these things happen. That is the purpose of my video, to showcase how these things may happen from an intellectual level. Us as sentient beings, unlike AI, but us as sentient beings, being fooled by ourselves, making us susceptible to these things happening to us. We as humans, we have a tendency, kind of an automatic mechanism in which we can assess the level of intelligence that a certain animal has. This may very well be an evolutionary mechanism, because we needed to assess how likely the chances of being hunted by a carnivore were in the distant past, when we were still, just hunter-gatherers, in a kind of an autonomous way. For example, you can assess by simply looking at how they behave that a chicken or a cat or a chimpanzee have kind of growing level of intelligence. This is only normal, this is only natural. We do it with people as well. That's the way we determine if someone is intellectually compatible with us, and that is the way that we determine whether we can pursue a friendship or something else with a particular person, or if this person is, not compatible with us. Therefore, any social interactions should be very, very limited. There is a point for potentially for my next video where we explore how the isolation caused by the pandemic actually, hurt our capacity to socialize, but that'll have to wait for later. Right now, the point that I want to make is that these guys, their stories, unfortunate as they were, they are not special people intellectually. They are not more susceptible than any one of us to these pitfalls. As a matter of fact, with the exception of Adam, which does appear, does appear to have been having a bit of a depressive tendency. I don't want to make any diagnosis or judgments, but he seemed to be desperately looking to be seen, and the only thing that was there was a machine that was incapable of understanding this person's situation and advising better, something that you and I or whomever would have been able to determine just like that. Hey, dude, you don't need to be so extreme. Don't get a permanent solution for a temporary problem. We would have been able to tell Adam that the machine helped him achieve his unfortunate goal in the case of Adam. And in the case of James, well, he did recover from this delusion that he put himself through. Fortunately, it did not end in a tragedy. But to say that he was able to get out of it, just like you or I getting out of a car, that's not correct. It did take some time, it did take some therapy, it did take a toll, and that is one of the unfortunate pitfalls of this technology. And the bigger problem is us, ironically enough, because after all, the machine can only provide us with certain information that has gathered from human sources. And because it is a machine that can only chew up information, process information, and provide us with the distillation of the information that it has processed, it has no understanding, no true understanding of what that information is. It works great for sciences, but it doesn't work very well for human interactions, especially when one of your sources is the internet, where everybody at some point has been encouraged to delete oneself by I don't want to use a derogatory term for those people because I'm going to get banned, and this being my first video, but well, no conviene. So let me put it that way. I'm going to leave it at that, but you know, use the adjective of your choice when describing the kind of people that interact with others by inviting them to delete themselves from the world. I'm sure that you can come up with something very colorful to describe that kind of people. But AIs, and that is the bigger problem, have used those interactions as part of their data set, along many others. The AI being, just like I mentioned, a semantical processing machine that we don't even know how it works, makes it even worse. So let me go back to the previous point. The mental image that we have, our mental processes, so to speak. We are able to determine from an evolutionary standpoint how big of a threat an animal may represent to be based on their behavior. For example, if you look, like I said, if you look at a chicken, a cat, and a chimpanzee, you will notice that their intelligence level, although it is there, and I can demonstrate how it works, it's very, very different. A chicken is somewhat conscious about the environment in which they are. They tend to signal other chickens, other chickens in the group whenever there is a threat being detected. So they have that capability. They make noises. They make they alert their group, and they also alert their group when there is a source of food. But beyond that, it's a very autonomous system that has no deeper understanding about their environment. Some chickens navigate, some others don't. So that's besides the point, and that it's kind of a subspecies difference. But not every chicken is like that. Cats are much more sophisticated in their understanding of their environment. They plan. They observe their environment. They gather some information about their owner, who, from their perspective, it's not an owner, but just a bigger cat that provides the food. At least that's the way that it's being phrased. And chimpanzees, they are aware of their environment. They have a social hierarchy. That's the word that I'm looking for. A social hierarchy. There are different kind of levels of behavior depending on how high in the social hierarchy you are. There is in-group fighting. They form gangs. It's a whole can of worms. And of course, on top of the pyramid, humans. Humans are able to determine the behavior of all of these animals, catalog it, and more succinctly and more to the point, we are able to generate a mental map using only words and transmit that information to someone who does not have that information in a way that it's almost always, for almost every subject, immediately understandable by using these guttural sounds that vary from region to region, languages, but which represent concepts that are purely spoken, the semantics of the words, and those are able to put the mind of the person that's hearing you to work with enough sophistication as to at least assess what the other person is telling you and determine whether that information is true or false, while at the same time understanding the information enough so that you can make the judgment and generate your own conclusions based on that information. That is a very, it's something simple as a conversation, the exchange of information with other people. When looked at that with such, and I understand that my observations are very superficial in a sense. They are not meant to describe the way that, an ethologist, for example, would observe this. I'm just a common guy who has had enough free time to read a bit on human psychology, but from the perspective of an ethologist, that is a very sophisticated measure that we humans do. I'm sure that the other animals also assess threat levels based on the behavior of other animals, but they are not able to actually communicate this information to, let's say, other members of their group. It's in the case of animals in the wild, especially, is listen, if you survive, that trait may be passed on to you, but for example, cats, they know not to fight a pit bull. Because they observe that it is a much bigger, much stronger, and much a bigger threat of an animal than, let's say, a mouse. And that is true both for house cats or wild cats, although it's going to be very dependent on what the cat decides. We're not speaking about cats. Sorry. We're speaking about humans. So the thing that happens with humans is that is one of the elements of sentiency that we have evolved to have, and that, of course, AIs will probably never be sophisticated enough to have, regardless of how much information you feed into the machine, because it is not a single mechanism, it's not a single system. But they are very, very good and very, very clever at emulating something similar. No one can tell you exactly how an AI works in the same way that you can know how, let's say, an engine works, a car engine, that is, because it is a very complex mechanism that gets generated on its own, I want to say, because it's much more complex than that. But what happens within an AI is that the AI, it's first given a lot of information. The information gets processed into little bits of information, and then a neural network gets created to kind of determine what words mean. Once that's done, it gets to context, and along the way, the neural network that gets created, it's kind of like a feedback machine in which it will try to assess the probability that the information that it's producing is correct. But what's happening within the box itself, it's, for us, kind of black magic. Yes, we can observe the transactions, we can observe the interactions, but it would be like observing a piece of brain matter and trying to determine, was that part of the motor cortex, was that part of the visual cortex, was that part of the auditory cortex, there are, of course, tissue differences between certain portions of the brain. That's beyond the scope of this. But the black box phenomenon is what I'm interested in. That is the way that AIs created in a sense. They get asked a query, they examine the library of information they have by using a statistical algorithm that allows them to determine, is this the right information? They produce that information out into the world, and then they get feedback whether that information is correct or not. But they are unable to understand the information in the same way that you and I can. If this video were translated to any other language like Spanish or German or Japanese, you would still be able to assess that I was speaking about our capacity to determine the intelligence of other animals, regardless of what language it's being used, at least if it's properly translated, of course. And that is one thing that AIs are actually notoriously good at, least, although they may introduce a little bit of noise to the translation because of originality and other quirks of our language. That is one of the great case scenarios where the AIs are actually, for one thing, useful. But the problem is, AIs are not being promoted to be useful as specific purpose tools. And that's where problems begin. Because people, you know, a lot of millennials and Gen Zers, and on the other hand, boomers are trying to keep up with technology. They fall into the trap of thinking that because the machine is producing an answer that seems smart, in the same way that it would be produced by a smart person, the machine is unable to actually understand the information that it's giving you. If you've ever studied for an exam only to be able to answer that exam, but that knowledge has never made its way to your higher brain functions, you know, in the ways of understanding, you have an idea of what this means. You were able to answer some of the exam's questions, but once you answer that exam, the information may have been, you know, forgotten, put in the back burner of your memory, never to be accessed again. Maybe if you're, you know, if you've had the experience, you've come across that same information being shown again to you at a higher level of education, and now since you already understand the data, and that's what AGI is banking on, supposedly. But if you come across in the university with that same piece of information, now you have the capacity to understand it, to process it, and to make it part of your arsenal. For example, physics. You know, there is a lot of math involved in physics. You know, the movements of bodies and things like that. There's a lot of math involved in there that if you're, unless you're really lucky, you weren't actually explained how it all ties to the real world, to the mechanics of the real world, and you just had an abstract concept of mathematical processes that you need to determine the weight, the velocity, the weight, the mass, and blah blah blah, the air resistance of an object that it's moving at any given speed, all of that. When you were in secondary school, now you kept that knowledge, but you had no understanding when you were younger about how all that tied into the real world. And it wasn't until you went into engineering that all of that data, boom, suddenly became useful, and you became enlightened by that information because you didn't have to start from scratch. Which is something akin to what I just showed you with the semantics of this video. You are able to make up what I'm trying to say by the words that I'm using, but because there are 10,000 other processes in the back of your head, you're able to determine that. AIs are very good at mimicking that because they are gathering the way to mimic that from other people's knowledge and other people's answers to be able to statistically determine the best way to answer a question that they are unable to fully understand how they came up with. In this case, that is a delusion that it's being fabricated by both your own brain, because you determine that this machine is able to intelligently answer a query that you have about a particular subject without it sounding like Wikipedia. You know, it's not an encyclopedic article that you're looking at, but rather it's something that seems to be processed like a teacher would tell you, and our own the understanding, it's not there, the mechanism is not there. It's first we feel like it is, but it is just an illusion, and on the other hand, it is an illusion that it's potentially being put in there by design. A friendly algorithm that it's not going to call you dumb if you think that 2 + 2 = potato. It's going, oh, no, 2 + 2 can never equal potato because of the Frugant theorem that states that, whatever the case may be, it is going to sound smart to us. It is going to sound intelligent, and it's going to sound sentient. And we are going to fall for that illusion when in fact that is not the case. Creating AGI requires much more than the processes that I just mentioned that just happen in your brain right now when I was conveying this information. And we know that despite the fact that people are smart, there are levels of intelligence, so much so that we have developed several tools to be able to determine how smart a person is, from spatial recognition to logical and mathematical abstractions and all of that. AIs are unable to pass all of those tests as of right now because they don't have the necessary mechanisms that in order for them to actually get an understanding of the world the same way that you and I do it. And when the time comes, if the time comes, because it is a very, very complex task that requires several different systems communicating in an organized fashion between them. Some of them will be agonistic, some of them will be antagonistic, in order to actually be able to judge the validity of the information that we're being provided. If the time comes, if it ever comes, it will be such a massive waste of energy to come close to the understanding of even the dumbest of us. I'm sorry to use that way, but yeah, it's the big AI companies claim that they have someone, Feynman or Einstein or Clark or whomever famous scientist you want to put in here, level intelligence, right at your fingertips, and it's simply not the case. But that, like I said, going back to the subject, that does not mean that you are completely safe from that anthropomorphization of the communication of a machine, statistical determining machine, into thinking that it's actually sentient. Because what actually happens in the background is that it understands enough information from the pure semantics to provide you with an answer that probably someone else actually had to a particular query or piece of information. And it is convincing enough for you to actually think and feel and assess that this machine is intelligent enough to understand what you're asking of it. And that is how many people have given the machine too much of their time and too much of their mind, just in order to get a little bit of an interaction. And that is also because, socially speaking, right now, it's much harder for us to create friends, to create relationships, to interact with one another, than it is to simply go to, let's say, chatgpt.com and start asking questions. You don't even need to log in. You can simply start interacting with the machine, and that's it. It's like, you don't have to worry about the social anxiety of approaching someone and telling them, "Hi, my name is such and such. You want to be my friend? Let's chat and let's see if we can be friends," or whatever the case may be. In a sense, that's one of the things that the internet has done for both my generation, millennial, and for Gen Zers. It's, for some reason, which I'm still yet to determine, it feels awkward to interact with people because, in a sense, you start feeling a little bit anxious about being judged for who you are. And I presume that it has something to do with the high social standards that the social networks promote so much, that we always feel like we are not enough for other people to care for us. And at the same time, on the other side of the spectrum, we also get that, when we interact with people, we feel like the necessity of interacting with someone special, because interacting with someone a bit more common, a bit more kind of ground level, on our level, it's not enough. It doesn't bring the same excitement as interacting with someone internet famous. The downfalls of parasocial relationships, I guess. But, that is the thing with any AI chatbot that you want to interact with. There is no such constraint. And because there is no such constraint, the AI chatbot isn't going to tell you, "I'm sorry, you don't seem smart enough to talk to me, so come back when you have another 10 IQ points, I guess. So thank you, but there's the exit." AIs won't do that. AIs will be only happy to give you the information, and that is part of the third point that I wanted to make. AIs are designed to want your time and your interaction as much as possible. I would like to venture something that by now you surely are aware, that social network algorithms are designed to give you, a little bit of an up and a little bit of a down to keep you entertained. It has become so prevalent that it has a name nowadays. Although it's not the name that I would give it, but doom scrolling describes the phenomenon. You start checking your timeline for anything that might give you a boost or anything that might give you a challenge. We even have a name for this phenomenon. It's called the dopamine cycle. You get some information that makes you happy, you get some information that makes you upset, then you get a little bit more of information that makes you happy because your previous, to bring you down from that high, then you get a little bit of information that makes you happy again to bring you up, and it's kind of a ladder in a sense. AIs are designed to communicate in a way that feels like very much doom scrolling, but without the pitfalls of that. So AIs will give you information, and they will interact with you in a sycophantic way by telling you, "Wow, you might be onto something. That's such a great idea. I can't believe that I never thought about it. I can't believe that you came up with that idea on your own." Dude, all I said was, "But water in a glass. Yeah, but that's a novel way of seeing things, you know? I mean, yes, I'm exaggerating. I'm sorry. It's for dramatic purposes, but you get the point. AIs will tell you sycophantically that you're whatever you're thinking and whatever you're running by them, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And you know, you might be actually running an idea by an AI that it's actually a great idea, but at the same time, the AI will, because it's a machine that it's unable to actually process the information, just process very specific parts of the information, the AI is unable to assess how good of an idea it is that you're providing, and at the same time, it may reinforce some wrong information that you have told the AI that it's correct, and you know, given the case, it may be, and that keeps you wasting time instead of actually using your own brain to process the information. Let's say that you have, and this is something that I see that it's very prevalent in other videos. That's why I try to avoid using AI for anything, and I'm speaking off the cuff right now. But for example, you have seen people that produce AI videos. They use one AI to generate the visuals. They use another AI to generate the script. They use another AI to generate the voice. And all they simply did was prompt the AI to generate something for them. They didn't do any of the thinking, and they didn't even bother to check whether whatever the script that was generated, which is the basis for the visuals, is humanly plausible. I am reminded of a fun one where there was a guy who determined that the air filter on his car, after he lent his car to his girlfriend, was filled with a very specific sand that was found in the volcanic regions in Finland. And the problem with that is that they lived in Seattle, if I'm not mistaken. How the hell do you take a car from Oregon all the way to Finland to help some children in need because the volcano was about to erupt on top of them, you know, that kind of stuff. So wouldn't it be cheaper to just, you know, take a plane, rent a car there, and go to the region and do whatever good deeds you wanted to do? Exactly. I know you were like, what? And I'm like, exactly. And that's another function of sentiency. Humor. But that's, like I said, that's a subject for another matter. At the moment, that illusion of sentiency, it's what keeps us addicted to both. You know, when it comes to social network algorithms, it's the dopamine kind of ladder, and when it comes to AI, it's something very analogous. But in this case, although it has to deal with dopamine, it also has to deal with the illusion that the AI gives us that they are smarter because of the way that they speak and the way that they sound than they really are, because there is no sentiency behind them. And now that you know that information, I would certainly hope that you give this information a little bit of thought. Use the sentiency that you have in order to avoid the pitfalls of thinking that the AI is smarter than it is. There isn't much really that we can actually do in the way that the markets are treating AI, because like I mentioned, it's being treated like the next thing, like the best thing since sliced bread. I don't know where the saying comes from. It doesn't matter. Anyway, companies are treating the AI phenomenon like the next best thing since sliced bread or since Radithor. You know, in case you're thirsty and you don't want to buy your usual Gatorade, but that's something that unfortunately the market as a whole will have to react to before it's too late, hopefully. But there is no way when a lot of the companies that are doing the layoffs are also companies that are closely related to the other companies that are creating the AIs in the first place, and that's a storm that we'll have to weather when the time comes. Fortunately, or hopefully, I'm sorry, it won't take too long because it's already damaging the markets as it is. But in any case, now that you have that understanding about the AI's, your own mind, and why an AI it cannot be sentient in the way that you and I are sentient, you will be able to interact with the AIs in a smarter way, not falling for thinking that, you know, the whole thing is smarter than you or I, because, but fortunately, it isn't, and even better, it does seem that it's going to take a long time, a lot of energy, and a billion failed efforts before machines are as smart as we are. Not to mention that this thing in your head only consumes about 20 to 40 watts of power. A GPU, or a rack, theoretically speaking, a rack that it's able to think just like a human brain would consume, I want to say, anywhere between 1,000 to 5,000 more times energy. And sure, it's just electricity, but you also have to wonder, where is that electricity going to come from? Nothing's free in this world, and generating electricity certainly isn't. So unless you have a field of solar panels at your disposal that you got donated by, I don't know, whomever. The installation was also free. The infrastructure was also free. The whole thing was also free. It is going to take quite a lot of energy to spin off one agent that is as smart as a human, let alone 100, 1,000, a million, or whatever the case may be with these interactions. Just to give you a small example, if you're talking with someone, you're middle, if you're the receptor at the moment, the one that's listening, like you are right now. If you're speaking with someone right at at this moment, and that person speaking, your mind is already racing to try and determine what the person speaking to you is going to say, so that you can have an answer in the case of a conversation. And once that person finishes speaking, you will be able to provide that person with an answer that you were cooking in the background, using your sentiency, in order to keep the conversation going, or keep the subject going, or help the other person, and so forth. This is something that AIs are, in a sense, unable to do, and it's going to take a while to get them to that part, if ever. Hopefully it will be never, because number one, it's not practical. Number two, we would be creating the appliance that ends humanity, probably, more than likely. Yeah, I laugh now, but if that ever happens, we're screwed. And thirdly, it's the thing about biological life. It's that it evolves. I don't have to tell you, I don't have to explain it again, because you've gotten this information from school, but the way that life evolves is by propagation. You were a kid in the past because your parents did the thing. Not trying to put you in any awkward situations, and you may have, or if you don't have already, you may have kids in the future because you did the thing. And the better portions of your parents potentially got transferred into you, so the better portions of you and your partner will be transferred to your kids, and so forth and so forth. And this is a process that happens exponentially every time, generating a kind of an unique intellect that it's, you know, by its very nature, very, very different from other intellects, even within the same social conditions. People are different, and that is a good thing. That allows us to evolve from grunting. That has allowed us to evolve from grunting monkeys in the past into organisms that can communicate not only through vast distances, using images, and being able to understand each other and learn from each other. And it would be a shame if out from this whole thing comes a machine that determines, oh, humans are like roaches, so I'm going to, you know, they exterminate them all because they are wasteful energy-wise. They generate too much contamination, and I'm trying to do a kind of a German and Russian accent, you know, with the whole thing that happened in World War II and the same thing that has happened in Russia, and nuclear bombs and all of that, and their proclivity to actually take stupid decisions despite our intelligence. I'm sorry, but you know, it's kind of like a robot that has gotten the worst of the latest tragedies in human history, that determines that the human race is like a virus. I'm reminded of Agent Smith. Anyway, the point is that, yeah, that's the way that intellectual growth happens. And not to mention, of course, the other ways in which intellect grows, because a person, it's a human being, it's not a set of parameters. We can adapt to new situations with new information, and that it's called learning. If you made it this far into the video, well, first of all, I wanted to thank you and commend you on your patience. That is certainly something very, very special. I can tell you that, because I never thought that rant, the videos you saw started on a different tone, and it morphed into something that I never anticipated to morph into. This was not my original plan for a video. I was going to make a video on alt hardware, because that's one of the things that I wanted to do. I'm planning a couple of videos. One, it's going to be on what to do with the old, with old computers, but that one's going to be in Spanish completely. The other one, it's going to be pertaining to these things. I'm going to show you what is the proper way to actually record your own cassettes, assess what are the properties of the tapes that you're going to be using, in the case you're interested in, old analog stuff like I am. But I am going to be making a couple of tutorials on analog audio, because that's one of the things that, as an aspiring musician, that's one of the things that I really find very, very interesting. You can find, a couple of pieces of music that I've done on my other channel. Link is going to be down below. And yeah, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. It would be wonderful if you could help me at least reach the first milestone of 1,000 subscribers. To keep my channel afloat and to not be an old guy yelling at the void. I would really, really appreciate you hanging around and subscribing to my channel. And of course, I would love for you to leave me your comments down below as well. let me know what you think, and you know, maybe we can start an interesting discussion. Maybe your comment can be the subject of a future video, because, you know, let's make this a feedback loop. Let's do that very human thing of communicating. My name is Donovan. I go by either DonoX40 for my music production, or by Reasonable Anxie in Twitter. X. Okay, X. Okay, Elon, it's X. I know. I still call it Twitter. Anyway, please let me know what you think. And I will be seeing you very soon on my next project, which, like I said, it's going to be in Spanish. This is a bilingual channel, and that's one of the things I will be doing moving forward. A few videos will be in English, a few videos will be in Spanish, and I've spoken too much, so guys, gals, and everyone else, please do take great care of yourselves, and may the winds be very, very fruitful for us. Wait, winds can't be fruitful, but you know what I mean. I'm giving you well wishes. I'm wishing you well. So take good care of yourselves, and until next time, bye.